This Ask Energy question comes from Paul, and Paul is wondering what the difference is between a carnivore diet and a ketogenic diet or a keto diet. Okay, in a previous video, I actually had an Ask Energy question, what the difference was between a ketogenic diet and an LCHF, a low carb, high fat. So this one is kind of an interesting question also because the carnivore diet is kind of blowing up, right? So Paul, let me explain this. So the ketogenic diet usually reduces or restricts carbohydrates to a certain level. So that could be, it's usually about 20 to 50 grams of carbohydrate per day. But with that, I do recommend if you are following a ketogenic diet to make sure you are in ketosis, do some blood measurements. You can get some keto strips, blood glucose kind of deal, kind of strips. You just prick your finger, use a keto strip. You can actually measure if you're in ketosis. I recommend that because if you are trying to produce ketosis from a ketogenic diet, you want to make sure that you are actually eating a low enough amount of carbohydrates. Okay, so the ketogenic diet is basically high fat, low carb, moderate protein. Okay. Restricting carbohydrates to under, let's just say 50 grams a day. Now, the carnivore diet is literally, there's really, it's a high restricted diet, right? But you don't have to worry about carbohydrates because literally the carnivore diet is only eating animal-based protein sources like meat, butter, milk, not even milk, right? Because the whole deal with carnivore is zero carbohydrates. Carnivore diet is very anti-plant. So no plants whatsoever in a true carnivore diet, right? Now, that's the main difference between the two. I'm just going to go off a little bit and just explain a little bit more about the carnivore diet and maybe versus the keto diet. So there are, as there are with keto diets, there are iterations of the carnivore diets, right? Because now there are people who really promote the carnivore diet, but they're saying, oh, well, you can eat some fruits or eat some honey or whatever it is to get a little bit of carbohydrates in there. And so whatever reason that is for, I'm not debating that. I am just going to say, here are the pros and cons of the carnivore diets. So pros, amazing blood sugar stability. I tell you what, because the protein and the fat found in animal proteins, the meats, oh my gosh, your blood sugar will stay stable. You'll certainly be more metabolically efficient. So you'll be using more fat, more of your stored fat as energy because you're not going to have any carbohydrates coming in from your dietary strategy. So amazing fat burning potential with a carnivore diet. I've heard a lot of individuals who go on the carnivore diet also don't have that keto flu. So you probably have heard this too. For those people who follow ketogenic diets, usually the first week or two, maybe even three, they kind of get these flu symptoms, and it's because the body is kind of adapting to a new nutrition program. But with the carnivore diet, there isn't so much of that because it's such an extreme from going to how you're eating now into completely no carbohydrates, right? So it's a very big extreme with that. So that could be a pro, could be a con also. All right, another pro is, yes, it's got great blood sugar stability. You probably don't have to eat that often because you will be so full because protein and fat increases satiety or the fullness in your body, okay? Pros, those, I might think of a couple more, but those are the ones off the top of my head, right? The cons now, this is what you need to figure in. Number one, maybe preparation of all this stuff, right? So you've got to have time to cook all of these animal proteins, all these meats, right? So that's number one. Number two, you may have digestive challenges. So when you take plant-based foods or carbohydrates out of your nutrition plan, you take fiber out of your nutrition plan. So oftentimes I will hear of some people, especially initially, who start the carnivore diet, they have irregular bowel movements. They're very constipated because they don't have fiber. Fiber is very necessary it's a necessary component or nutrient to help things move through your system. The other thing about fiber is fiber actually provides prebiotics. So prebiotics help probiotics do their job. So basically build up the good bacteria in your gut. So not that the carnivore diet is horrible at that, but there are some repercussions to not eating fiber for some individuals, okay? Another con is, and this is a huge debate right now, is with the whole cholesterol and blood lipids. There is no conclusion on this whatsoever. And believe me, I have scoured the research to try to find it. It's not there. It seems to come down to an N of one, to be honest with you. I know one individual who's very pro carnivore diet, actually a medical doctor, Dr. Paul Saladino. He has abnormally high blood lipids, high LDL particle size, all of that, right? And everything is kind of checking out in terms of his health. So his argument is, does eating like high fat really increase cholesterol to the point where I could potentially have a cardiovascular event? He's arguing that right now. And I think there's a lot of interesting arguments to his arguments, right? It's fascinating actually. So his main argument is, well, even though if I have high cholesterol or high LDL-C, high LDL particle size, maybe a high ApoB, does that really matter if all my other markers, like my calcium artery scan, if all of that checks out, does it really matter? Like that my cholesterol is high? I mean, it's kind of debating the whole what we've thought about in the past, where high cholesterol equals death. Maybe not. That's the argument. But I do have to bring that as a con because you just don't know, right? I definitely would not start a carnivore diet without getting a very comprehensive set of blood work done in what's called an advanced lipid screening. So that includes not only the basics like your cholesterol, LDL, HDL, triglycerides, but deep down, like look at particle size. It's usually called an NMR test or lipoprotein test, where you're looking at the particle size of these lipoproteins, right? You're also looking at LP little a, you're looking at ApoB, all of these things you want to have before you start such an aggressive type of quote unquote diet, because the carnivore diet is extremely restrictive. It's somewhat easy to follow. Like I said, like keto is, I feel like it's a little bit harder to follow a keto diet because you're really trying to manipulate the carbohydrates, making sure you're staying under, maybe taking your blood to test your ketosis level. But the carnivore diet, listen, it's just like, hey, eat meat, don't eat any carbs. Simple. It's like there's a line in the sand and don't cross it, right? So in terms of that, another con could be potential nutrient deficiencies. So again, the reason why a lot of people say eat a lot of variety is so you get a lot of varieties of vitamins and minerals, right? So, and there's an argument to this with the carnivore diet, and I totally get it, but there is a potential for not getting enough of the vitamins and minerals and phytochemicals that come from plant sources, right? And that could affect the way the body's immune system, digestive system, all of that stuff, right? So potential cons, there are some pros to it. It's not, I'm not going to give you what I recommend because literally at the end of the day, it is really an N of one decision. I try to counsel people on this all the time and help them decide. But again, what I look at is family history. I look at their current history in terms of blood work and in terms of health. And I also look at what they're doing from a training perspective, because if you're doing a lot of high intensity training, sometimes just eating protein and fat is not going to cut it to be able to achieve those super high intensity levels of efforts, right? Normally, a lot of people do really well from a training perspective on a carnivore diet if they are doing more lower to moderate, maybe moderate high, right? Depending on the person, but that type of training versus a higher intensity training. So some pros, some cons to think about. Would love to hear your feedback. If anybody has any feedback, if you're on the carnivore diet, let us know how it's going. Was it difficult? Do you feel like you're managing it okay? And if you're on the keto diet, let us know. How are you managing that? Is it tough to stay in ketosis? Okay. So just drop your comments below. And Paul, thank you again for asking this week's Ask eNRG question.